Hey y'all, welcome back to Dots and Beyond. My name is Beth. Today we are going to talk about the books that I read in March and set up my reading journal for April. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to begin by jumping back to March and looking at what I set up for March, what I planned to read in March. So our pick for March was The Cask of Amontillado. We'll talk about that while I'm setting it up for April. And then this is where I keep track of the books that I am reading over the month, as well as the days of the month that I have read. And I can cross off March 31st here as well, though that was a little bit of an interesting day, which we will also talk about while we're setting things up. I did finally get around to reading I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I did give this 4 stars, not 5. Not that I don't appreciate how raw and real she is in this, but she's not an author, and that's pretty obvious. But I do love how just candid she is in this book. I love how honest she is. As a mom, it was very difficult for me to read. As a mother, it was just, I was like, who is protecting this child all the way through all of the things that she is going through? I mean, from even the agents that her mom picks are mothers. Like, where were those agents in this whole process? It's very heartbreaking. It's definitely popular for a reason, especially in the, under 30 set, or in the age range of those who grew up with watching Nickelodeon and the shows that she was on. But yeah, I'm glad I read it. Absolutely glad I read it. Ticks one of my boxes for a memoir for the year. So there is that. I actually did read, I had to take a break partway through I'm Glad My Mom Died, because it was just like I hit this point where I was like, I have to stop now. In between that, I thought, okay, I have had this book of short stories by Ishiguro for years. I don't know how long this book has been on my shelf. I have had it forever and for always. I love music. I love the nighttime, and this 5 stories of music and nightfall just always sounded very intriguing to me. The cover is beautiful, this whole Venice situation going on here, and it's fine. I love a good short story. Most of them didn't resonate with me. And that's the thing with the short story collection. The first one of the bunch, which I think is called Crooner, was my favorite, was the one that I felt like I resonated with the most. Yeah, so Crooner, Come Rain or Shine, Come Shine, Malvern Hills, Nocturne, and Cellists. Crooner and Cellists would be my 2 favorites, but I have an issue with cello music. I just love the cello. It is my favorite instrument. It sounds so mournful and sad, and I just love the cello. This is also my first read of Ishiguro's. This is also Ishiguro's first short story collection, so as opposed to novel or long form, and so maybe those things just didn't gel for me. Definitely not going to rule out reading any future Ishiguro as we go along, but as collections go, it's perfectly readable. Not my favorite, 3 stars, and I ticked another book off of my backlist of books that I own that I have not yet read. So that was good. If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. How do I talk about this book? I've just finished this book. Let me grab it. First of all, this cover, if you didn't know that Shakespeare was heavily involved in this novel, this cover would give it away. I mean, it just would. So I started reading If We Were Villains and trying to annotate it, and I realized that if I continued at the pace that I was going, I was never gonna finish it. And so I stopped annotating, because I was never going to finish the book if I didn't stop annotating, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to read it again. The first thing I guess we need to do is that I'm going to rate it, and I'm going to rate it 5 stars. Is this book going to be for everyone? Absolutely not. I don't typically read suspense, murder, mystery kind of things, which is really where this sits. It sits in the new, what we're calling dark academia genre, along with that sort of murder mystery element to it. My degree, and I've mentioned this before, is in English literature. I am quite well versed in Shakespeare. And the premise of this story, we have these 7 students that we are focused on that attend this very elite arts school for drama. There are also music students, language students, philosophy students, but we're focused on the theater kids. As they go through their collegiate years, it becomes more and more elite, and they get narrowed down more and more and more. Like, you get kicked out. Like, if you're not good enough after your freshman year, you get kicked out. Sophomore year, not good enough, you get kicked out. So we've reached the senior year, and we have these 7 students that have started very much to fall into stereotypes in their personal lives versus how they're cast in Shakespeare. They're also very pretentious. They speak to one another in verse and in Shakespeare quotes, many of which I knew, but again, with the degree that I have, my level of annotating got to be, it's not good enough for me to know that this came from Hamlet. I need to know that this came from Hamlet scene 3, act 3, scene 1 kind of thing. And that's why I'm going to go back through this, because obviously M.L. Rio dove deep. She dove deep into Shakespeare. Now, she dove deep into pretty much the most popular Shakespeare, not that she didn't tap into some of the ones that are not as popular. We have these 7 individuals. Something bad happens. Is one of them involved? Our narrator? Or are all of them involved? We don't know. By the time we get to the reveal, again, about halfway through, there's sort of a conversation about strengths and weaknesses that takes place through the course of one of their classes that kind of clued me into the reveal. And I zoned in on what I thought happened, and I was right. But I think that again was tied to the amount of research M.L. Rio did into Shakespeare and the characters in Shakespeare and the strengths and weaknesses she put into our 7 individuals that clued me into that. Would everybody pick up on it? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. It is, so far, we consider Babel to be dark academia as well. I don't know. I love them both for 2 very different reasons. This one just speaks to my nerd literature heart. And I very much enjoyed it. Not everybody is going to enjoy it. A lot of people are going to find it pretentious, but even the author, in her postscript says, and there is no denying exceptionally pretentious dialect. And it is. And she knows it, and she wrote it to be that way, and I just love it. I really, really do. Definitely going to keep it. It'll live on my Shakespeare shelf just because it is so closely attuned with it, but I have not yet written my review because I'm still sitting with it, and I might not write whatever I'm going to write in here until I do a reread and annotate. Maybe not. I don't quite know what I'm going to do, but there we go. If We Were Villains, M.L. Rio, 5 stars for me, but I'm a Shakespeare nerd, so take that with that information, and we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, so after finishing How My Mom Died, I felt like I needed some brain candy. And so I moved into an audiobook, and in the fall I had done the audiobook for the first Bridgerton book, and I thought, well, let's just go ahead and do the audiobook for the second Bridgerton book. So I did The Viscount Who Loved Me, and I'm done with the Bridgerton books. So I gave this 2 stars. The television show is quite literally the best glow up possible. These books read like a Regency romance that was written in the 70s or 80s, and it's astonishing to me that they started being published in like 2016, because I'm like, ooh, these didn't age well. They're not that old. I'm also not that much of a romance reader, so I tend to be a little harder on it. You can see I didn't even write that much. I wrote down 1 quote in here, really didn't vibe with me, and it's enough that back on my series tracker, I DNF'd this series. I won't be finishing it. And if you love the Bridgerton books, more power to you. You just go on loving them. They're just not for me. After that, last month I read Darker Shade of Magic. I rated it 3.5 stars, and I was worried about jumping into book 2 because there was a little bit of a disconnect for me. Like, I loved it, and yet did I really love it? I don't know. I really struggled with this book. And then there was some encouragement from y'all online to go ahead and read it. And so I went ahead and got A Gathering of Shadows, and I've rated a second book in a series 5 stars, which is really rare for me. If you haven't read the Shades of Magic series, I don't want to give anything away, but I was very worried that A Gathering of Shadows would suffer from second book syndrome and just kind of be the connector with too much information in between book 1 and book 3. And I was already struggling just a little bit with book 1. Book 2 is my favorite of the trilogy because I also read book 3. It just connects things in a way. When we talked about the first one, I talked about how much I love a book set in London, how much I love a book set in multiple Londons. We get gray London, white, red, and black. Here we get to narrow in. We get to narrow in on a singular location, and we get to build out the world of that singular location and the people in that singular location, that one dimension of London. Not that we don't visit and tap in to some of the others, because we do, but the heavy focus is on a singular London. We meet some far more interesting characters that are brought into the mix that really round out Kel and Lila, our 2 main characters, to an extreme amount, to the point where you really begin to care for them and their idiosyncrasies. They're both flawed and yet you love them. And pirates, I wrote here, I said, pirates do make everything better. So pirates come into the mix in this fantasy novel. There's a wizarding competition, and yet we still have a big bad who's rising behind the scenes, and we're gonna have to face that big bad. And it really, the book ends with Lila about to go into another dimension of our Londons, and she's gone through this journey of self-discovery all the way through this book, and literally the last line is, "Whatever I am, let it be enough." And you're like, what? You can't end there. So Beth picked up the next book. It was one of those cliffhangers that I was like, nope. We're gonna roll. And I was doing these on audio, and I literally just downloaded the next one and immediately started it. I was like, you can't leave me there. That's not okay. And that is at least one of the benefits of starting a trilogy after it's already written and you're not having to wait for the next book. I have yet to read Patrick Rothfuss's In the Name of the Wind, because this third book is, where's this third book? Is it ever going to come? I think I'm going to read them this year, the first 2, because they just stare at me, and they're supposedly iconic when it comes to fantasy. I know enough about them just being a fantasy reader and watching fantasy YouTube and talking to fantasy reading friends. I know I even have a playlist based off of In the Name of the Wind, and yet I have never actually finished the book. I started it, and then I got into this rabbit hole of, well, is he ever going to write the third book? We don't know. So the great thing about picking up a series that's already written is that you can do what I just did and jump from A Gathering of Shadows to A Conjuring of Light. So did I know I was going to start and finish a trilogy in the first quarter of 2023? I did not. I rated this one 4 stars, so I've got a 3.5 on the first book, a 5-star on the second book, and a 4-star on the third book. It wraps everything up pretty much where I thought it was going to wrap it up. And that's where the 4-star instead of the 5-star comes in. There've been some kind of little surprise in there for me. And again, I'm not going to go into all the details or ruin it, but we still have our characters of Lila and Kel, who are these magicians. Lila in the first book doesn't know she has any of these magic powers. We also have Holland, who's morally ambiguous character, who is the same type of magician as Lila and Kel. And of course, there's a big bad that has to be defeated that we learn about early in the first book, and then of course it manifests over the course of the series from kind of, a mediocre threat to, oh crap, this really is a big bad sort of situation. Lives are lost, people die, it's a harrowing situation, but in the end it wraps up, and I wrote a little, everybody gets their thing. And of course, what I had mentioned kind of kept me going in the first book. The first line of A Darker Shade of Magic is something along the lines of, Kel had a very unusual coat. Kel wore a very peculiar coat. And so here I wrote, and Kel is the owner of a rather remarkable coat, one that gives him something new. It really is a peculiar coat. If you don't know, where I mentioned it in the first one, every time he takes off this coat and turns it inside out, he can have a different coat. And most of these coats he has seen. Every now and then it surprises him with a new version of a coat. And here, as this series wraps up, he goes to put on the coat and he ends up with a whole new coat that is perfect for the situation that he is finding himself in at the end of the trilogy. So it was a really great way for V.E. Schwab to bring it from beginning to end. And so I gave that 4 stars. And that should be my reading wrap up. And we can go ahead and set up for April. My Poe pick for April is going to be The Man of the Crowd. And of course, my Poe pick for March was Cask of Amontillado, which has always been one of my favorite Poes. And I think it still is. He has these sometimes morally gray characters, and sometimes they're just, as in this case, you know, our main character has been wronged by Fortunato. And in the very first line, he pretty much tells us that he and his family have been wronged by Fortunato multiple times in some way, shape, or form, but that at some point that has transitioned to insult. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. Do we know what Fortunato has done to Montresor and his family? Not necessarily. Again, this is a short story, so, you know, we got to get right to the point with Poe. What I do appreciate, as opposed to The Black Cat, which we read in January, and The Telltale Heart, which we read in February, is that this is not an unreliable narrator. He tells us right off the bat, I have been insulted. I'm going to get revenge. Basically, this is what I'm gonna do. And he proceeds to do it with no qualm. So his pride has been hurt, right? This is very much a story about pride. His pride has been hurt. And so he is vowing revenge against Fortunato. How's he gonna do that? Well, he's going to prey on Fortunato's pride and his vanity about being such a wine expert. And during the festivities of Venice Carnevale, he invites him down into his cellars to taste a cask of an Amontillado. And he's like, oh, I think I've been duped, and maybe this is not an Amontillado. And Fortunato's like, oh, how did you get an Amontillado? I want to see it. I want to taste it. Like, thank you for asking my opinion, kind of thing. And oh, let's go see it right now. And all the way through the journey down into this cellar below the depths of Venice. And of course, I'm thinking, how deep can this cellar be? This is Venice, right? It's like, is there anything underground in Venice that wouldn't flood with water? Somebody's gonna have to explain that to me later. And so Fortunato follows him down there, and Montresor all the way along is, oh, you sound like you have a bad cough. Maybe we should go back. Oh, and he keeps calling him my friend, which is just sinister. It's just sinister. But he uses his hurt pride, and then Fortunato's obsessively confident pride in wine to get him down into these cellars, where he then chains him to a wall and bricks him in. And we are told that is where he stays. You know, even when Fortunato begins to realize, or he also plies him with drink the whole way along. They stop at other casks and stop all the way along the way, so that Fortunato is incapacitated. I don't know where it is. I have lost this washi tape. I don't know where I've put it, and so we're just gonna use a red one this time around. It's okay. Might even look better. Who knows? There we go. There's our Cask of Amontillado. Again, it's one of those short stories that just feels so fully fledged out. Oh, that ripped. That's fine. We're not picky here. It's just always been one of those ones that I've appreciated for its craftsmanship from beginning to end. And I still like it. I still love it. I rated it 5 stars. It's been a while since I'd read it, but I think I've read it more than I have some of the others, so I also remembered more of it, which is always the case. Oh, it's funny how it can just evoke. And I guess that, well, let's talk about that. So this was set in Venice. Very much of it set underneath Venice. And then that short story by Ishiguro that I read, the first one that's called Crooner, is set in Venice. And one of my criticisms in my personal review of that short story collection was that I felt like they lacked atmosphere. So even the first one, you know you're in Venice. You spend some of your time in palazzos, you spend part of your time in a gondola, you spend part of your time, you know, in like the Grand Hotel or outside the Grand Hotel. These iconic Venice scenes and things, and yet there was something about that short story that I was like, this could be happening anywhere. There was nothing that evoked that feeling of Venice. And here in Cask of Amontillado, and we're barely on the streets of Venice or the top of it, but you know by the description of their masks and their costumes, you know by Poe just does a better job of evoking that mood and feeling of Venice than Ishiguro did. And you're talking about two very different stories written in two very different times, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. You don't get that setting, that mood setting that connects you to time and place in the Ishiguro story as much as I did in Cask of Amontillado. That's a good comparison since I read one recently that had that. Okay, let's stick Man of the Crowd on here. And then I am filming this. What is today? It is April 2nd. This will probably go up today. I'll probably edit it and throw it up. I intended to film this video on Friday the 31st. And some of you may have paid attention to where I live or where I don't live, but I live in Little Rock, Arkansas. And on Friday the 31st, we had a pretty catastrophic, we had a very catastrophic tornado. A lot of places did on Friday. It was one of those supercells that kind of swept across the country. Hang on, I have to get out my Tolkien box and get a thinner nib. Micron. I spent a very hefty chunk of Friday in a closet with my cats, and we lost power. It was one of the closest calls that I have ever been in. Lost the pressure in my ears. Knew it was that close kind of situation. I have video. Kenny, my son that lives with me, was at work. His call was even closer than mine. I have video of the tornado. I didn't take the video. Storm Chaser took the video of the tornado within just meters of Kenny's work location, and he was at work, and it was just not a great day for Little Rock on Friday, March 31st, 2023. One of those things that we know we live in Tornado Alley, but when a tornado touches down in a metro area, when it touches down in a heavily populated area, I mean, it's been a rough weekend. Let's just say that. We are feeling personally very, very lucky. Yeah, it was a close call. When Kenny was 2, again, dating myself, back in 1997, and I still have the newspaper article tucked away somewhere. Back in 1997, we had a string of, it was some ridiculous number, triple digit number tornadoes touched down in the state of Arkansas. And one of them annihilated a huge section of the town that Kenny was born in. And we were living there at the time, but we weren't in town when it happened. We were actually up here in Little Rock. For a brief period of time, my parents were here, and we were up here visiting. We got stuck here because they wouldn't let anybody back into that town. I mean, it was that bad. National Guard had the town blocked off. We had to stay with my parents for a few days before we could get back into town. I was still married to Kenny's dad at the time. This is not our first brush with, and I think, if I remember correctly, my ex was on the phone with his mom in that town trying to find out if they were okay when the phones cut off. Because again, it was 1997. We didn't all have cell phones when the phones cut off and the sirens went off here in Little Rock, because the same storm cell, that had hit there then was coming through here. and it took out houses 2 or 3 blocks from where we were here in Little Rock at the time. So this is the second time that I've had a very, very close call with a tornado. It doesn't get any easier. I think about moving every time it happens. And I don't know if that's the answer either, you know. I mean, again, having it hit a metro area and then stay on the ground, because it stayed on the ground for 50-60 miles. I mean, it did untold damage. Popped up, popped down. A little town by the name of Wynne, Arkansas was pretty much annihilated, from what I can tell. And it's just not been a great day. So videos are coming out late, which is okay. We're fine. We're safe. We didn't even have any property damage. Out my back patio, I have forest area, and there is a crap ton of like debris and trash out there, but we didn't have any damage, and we're both safe, and my son is safe. Like, I'm a mom, so as terrified as I was more scared for my kid, especially when the video footage started rolling in and around his work area, and he hadn't made it home yet. And that's when things got a little hairy for mom. Okay, so here we have the setup for April. April, we're going to be reading The Man of the Crowd. I don't think I've ever read this. I have categorized this as horror/detective. So Edgar Allan Poe is pretty much given credit for the origins and the beginnings of detective stories. The Man of the Crowd is the first one of those to kind of not necessarily be a detective novel, but to have some of those elements that lead into the future of detective novels in it. So it was published in 1840. It has 3,508 words. It's still a short story, and that is what we are going to be reading for April. If you are reading along with me, now that it is April 2nd, and I can go ahead and, you know, I already read last night. And cross off April 1st. And then just flipping back really quickly, I've gone ahead and added things to my index. So I'm Glad My Mom Died, If We Were Villains, their page numbers are here. I've filled in half for my memoirs because I read I'm Glad My Mom Died. I think this is updated so far on my reading tracker. We can go ahead and color in April 1st there. I have added some books to my release radar. I think previously the only one I had on here was Scarlet by Genevieve Cogman. So I've added some other things that I'm looking forward to coming out. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to grab them as soon as they come out, but trying to pay a little bit more attention to releases. I used to really in the past, and then fell out of that habit. On my backlist of books that I actually own, I've gotten to knock off Nocturnes. I also got to knock off I'm Glad My Mom Died. And then of course, these we had already done. Not sure where we're gonna go next with that, but at least, you know, am I gonna get them all in the course of the year? Probably not, but we'll see. This is my FOMO spread, so things that I have bought just because I've watched it on YouTube or somewhere else and felt like, oh, I have to have that too. One of those was the writing retreat. And then I picked up E. Wild's Encyclopedia of Fairies. So I have that. That might pop up in our reading wrap up next month. We will see. So April, we will put The Man of the Crowd for our Poe pick. Our haul, you can hear where I'm gathering shadows, conjuring a light. I picked those up all on Audible. And then E. Wild's is a physical book. My key is right here as to what type of book that I do. Book of the month, I'm skipping my book of the month for April. None of those descriptions really resonated with me on the choices that we had, and I'm not going to go back and look at what those are, but I am skipping that for April. My series tracker, obviously I need to color in. I don't know where the brush marker is. I have all these microns that are different colors, and I do have a brush color for this one that I've used recently, so it's got to be nearby. But so Shades of Magic is done. What I have done, 2 things I changed on here, again, as the year goes along. I came in and colored boxes that I know I'm not gonna need. So, like the Invisible Library series only goes up to book 8. The Witcher, you know, Millennium's Rule for Shades of Magic, there's only 3 of them. Here's Bridgerton, and here's my DNF Bridgerton series 3 through 8. In fact, I think I'm gonna do that as well, just to drive home the fact that Beth, don't get the urge to pick one of those up and read them. You're not going to enjoy it. And then I'm really trying to go down the Robin Hobb Realm of the Elderlings trail, and I keep finding myself Googling the order that I need to read them in, and so I finally just decided I was going to stick them in here, even though I haven't made it to subsequent ones. So I've only read the first book of the Farseer trilogy, so it's here, and then I just kind of made this little loopy-loop to put Live Ship Traders, the Tawny Man, Rain Wild, and Fitz and the Fool over here, so that I can kind of, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So again, whether I get to them all in 2023 is to be determined, but that way I'll stop like looking it up. I can just come to my journal and know where it's at. Still haven't started filling in faves because I've got some pretty hefty 5-star reads already, and I just don't want to. I'll make this decision at the end of the year as to which 8 are going to go here, and then level them down from there. And then of course here is my reading, and here we are set up for April. So that is it for that April setup. And now that we have done that setup, I do have a little bit of a surprise for you. So every time I do one of these reading journals, I am asked, how do I print my book covers? What size are my book covers? All of that sort of thing. So I do have the 2 different sizes that are in here. I have these mini ones that I have on my back list, and then I have the ones that are larger that I use here for my book covers on my reviews or to record what I have read. And I have set up a Canva template for you guys. So you can go down to the description box and click the link for that template. It will automatically open up in Canva. You do not need the paid version of Canva, but you will need a Canva account to use that. So you can sign up for the free one. You definitively do not need the paid one. I will also link it in the freebies on my website on dotsandbeyond.com in case you lose it here on this video somewhere. We are going to go ahead and jump over to my computer screen so I can show you what that looks like and how to use it when you click on that free template. Okay, y'all, when you click on that Canva link for the template, this is the page that you should see, and it is just the cover page. It's got the instructions on it. You're going to click on that link and it's going to bring you directly into Canva. Now I do have the app, so it's asking me if I want to open this in the app. For now, we're just going to go ahead and click no thanks. You don't need to have the app to do that. This first page is a step-by-step instruction guide. If you have no experience in Canva, if you're comfortable with it, you can certainly delete that. And then we have 3 different pages of book cover templates. This one is mixed, so we have both the small size and the large size. Down at the bottom of the page, I do have the dimensions for each one of these sizes. So the small ones are 2 centimeters by 3 centimeters. That works out at 4 dot grid spaces by 6 dot grid spaces, when your dot grid is 5 millimeters, which is what the standard Archer and Olive or Notebook Therapy journals are. The larger ones are 4 centimeters by 6 centimeters, which is 8 by 12 dot grid spaces, again with that 5 millimeter dot grid. And then I added in a full page of the small as well as a full page of the large. Now you can just click here in the top, rename that whatever you want to, delete any of the pages you don't need. But now let's go ahead and look at how we drop in a book cover. To do that, you are just going to search for the title of the book that you are looking for in the browser of your choice. Mine happens to be Google. For these purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and put in If We Were Villains, since I just talked about that book, and then we're going to go ahead and search for it and then change the search to images. On Google, this top search is always going to be the shopping links, which are the ones you kind of want to avoid. I do look at the URLs down here at the bottom to try to find the ones that work for me best. Normally that comes from Goodreads or Amazon. There are other locations as well, and you can also look for the cover version that you prefer. This is not the one that I wanted, so I was bouncing around trying to find one that just had the singular cover image. It's normally not this difficult. Normally one of the first 1 or 2 images I find works for me. Once you have that, you're just going to right click on it and do copy image. Once we have that copied, we're going to paste it straight into Canva. There's no need to save it elsewhere. You're just going to paste it straight in. You can use that method, or you can use the shortcut keys with the Command V or Control V depending on what you are on. Then you are just going to click and grab it and drag it into the frame that you prefer, and it is going to pop right into the exact size. Here I'm going to paste it a second time and drag it into one of the smaller frames so you can see how easily it drops right in. Once you do that, they do appear in a section of your Canva called Uploads, which is over here on the left sidebar, and I'll click on that and you can see some of the things that I have uploaded recently, some of the book covers I've added in. You can delete things from here or keep them if you want to use them for future reference. And this is where I got the frames and the other things that fit into these specific spots, these sizes right here. You can also just copy a frame like I just did and drop it into a whole new page. So we're gonna paste that one right in there, and that's how I typically try to combine things when I am printing more than just a single book cover. I'm adding it to a page where I need some sticker paper for other things so that I'm not just printing one cover at a time and wasting the paper. If I were to do that, I wouldn't actually print on sticker paper. I would just print on regular copy paper, so I didn't feel like I was wasting the sticker paper. If you needed more per sheet, you can actually delete this header that I have up here and copy and paste these rows above to add some more book covers to your collection. Once you have your full page of covers ready to go, you're ready to download and print them. To do that, up in the right corner, you're going to click Share and then click Download, and you don't need to fill in any of these things other than file type, which you're going to change to PDF print. Again, leave all of these things blank and click Download. You're then going to share that particular file or save that particular file to the exact location that you're going to remember it, and just open it up and print it. Okay, I hope you guys use that template. I hope you find it helpful. I enjoyed putting it together for you because I've had the template for a while that I use. Again, I do combine mine sometimes if I'm printing other things for my work journal or for other setups. So I do kind of sometimes just do 1 or 2 book covers at a time, but combine them with a lot of other things so that I'm not wasting the sticker paper. But that's it for our April setup and March review. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.